the Change Leadership Conversations. Today I have with me Soula Courlas. She's the Management Consulting Executive, Managing Director, Talents, Organization and Human Dynamics at Accenture. Welcome, Soula.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Oh,
Really
it's
appreciate
great.
it.
It's great to have you. Met
For
you about
including
a
me.
year ago, and we've been talking since then. And we were meant to have you at the
Thank you.
2020 conference, and looking forward to having you at the 2021 conference.
Great.
Excited about that.
Me
And
too.
excited you could join me today because there's some interesting topics we're going to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
like how to adopt new behaviors in the face of the crisis that we're going through right now with COVID, the radical change, the disruption, all of that. But I want to start off by getting your take on the situation we are right now, on all of the changes we're going through. What's your take?
That's thank you for asking for my opinion on that. It's definitely a surreal time and a time of great reflection. We've talked about this earlier, you and I personally, before getting into our conversation about how it's a great opportunity to take a step back, to refresh, to rethink, to basically recalibrate even our priorities and what's important to us. So I think this is a time of great reflection, and when all this is behind us successfully, I think it's going to be an incredible case study of human resilience and
Exactly.
and leadership and management. And I
Yeah.
think, and this is where I was reflecting on with our conversation, is that leadership and management, when you look at it in an organizational context, those are critical pillars of success in moving an organization from point A to point B. The same goes for what I believe is happening clearly now with the management of this crisis at a societal level and basically a human survival level. Like our leaders, our government leaders and our political leaders are having to stand up and step up to key leadership and demonstrate key leadership and managerial competencies, basically, in order to get us through to a successful outcome. So when we even look at our own political leaders and other leaders around the world, leadership in its true sense of having to mobilize a disparate set of people distributed across different locations and geographies, different time zones, different belief systems and values, etc., and having to unite them is absolutely critical for success right now. And as well as management and managing the present and how do we move forward from where we are today. So being able to think about this as a massive change leadership opportunity and change management opportunity is an incredible learning ground for practitioners of all types, but also the leaders, the individuals who are tasked with getting us through this. So when you think about crisis management, for example, and organizational transformation, many of them share the same kind of dimensions. Like, they may just be on a different spot on the spectrum. Both kind of scenarios have timelines. They have outcomes. They have, they have an impetus. They have a driver of some kind. They have the need to be able to, to make decisions, to be able to enlist the participation of different stakeholder groups. They have different stakeholder groups, each having different needs. They both necessarily have implications related to legal issues, reputational issues, risk issues. So they all have very similar contexts like that, and the fact that they also need program management and risk management. So there's many dimensions of both scenarios, whether it's crisis driven by something that's unintended versus something that has been planned and has been thought through, basically approved, and now being initiated by a set of leaders. So there's also the aspect of the leadership is going to be tested in terms of how it brings together and engages the population, whether it's a workforce or at large.
Very similar.
Yes, and things like characteristics like being able to build your team and delegate to a team, be able to empower that team and let the team do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Knowing your background, you bring with you a lot of experience, 25 years plus experience, across Canada, Fortune 100, private and public companies. And one of the things you've been doing with those companies is advising senior executives. When you look at what you see in the private and the public sector, advising some of the C-suite clients, and you see some of the leadership right now in
Yes.
leading this crisis. What are some of the great change leadership qualities that you're seeing, whether here in Canada or globally, when it comes to leading and managing change?
Right. Well, that's a great question. I think what is absolutely paramount is to have, when you think about some macro skills and capabilities, being able to have a clear vision, being able to have clarity of where it is that you want to be able to go, and have a sense of what needs to change, what needs to happen in order to be able to take some action. And being able to articulate what absolutely has to change and what has to take place. So being articulate about what the implications are of changing and of not changing is critical. And being able to have a plan, being able to put together some immediate next steps and a plan of action, a timeline of what people can expect and can anticipate is also very important. It's being also, what's clear is being able to elicit a sense of trust in the people who are listening and who are party to the change. Being able to make a commitment of what the go forward plan was going to look like, being able to commit to transparency, being able to bring people along in a way that gives people information when they need it. So that they can be able to make some decisions for themselves too. And the other thing too, about the transparency and about the trust, it's important to be able to demonstrate that trust goes two ways. You're asking people to trust the leadership in their vision, in their request, in the rationale that they're giving in order to be able to make this change. But it's also demonstrating that you trust the people at large to be able to make some decisions, to be able to push back when they feel the necessary to do that, and be able to have faith that the people are going to carry out the messaging and the actions that are to be taken. So
and when you say that, it reminds me of the daily updates that we have been getting through the pandemic period from Prime Minister. Every day he's there in front of us, and he's not just coming and talking and speaking at us.
No,
he's giving us the opportunity to speak back and ask questions.
I agree.
Is a two-way communication stream. And often that's what's important in leadership that could be easily missed, where communication is not just a one-way street. It's a two-way street. It's a collaborative effort. And it's really about that transparency in terms of giving people information and trusting them to do what's right with that information. When we look at what this crisis has also brought in, it's brought on new behaviors. And when this crisis and pandemic is completely over, we're going to also have new behaviors we're going to adopt again. I'm starting to use the word new normal less and less, because people are saying we're in the new normal now. I just feel that we're just going to continue to experience rapid change.
I agree.
But what can we do to help adopt new behavior? Whether new behavior that is going to see us through the pandemic and new behavior that is going to see us post-pandemic. How do people adopt new behaviors? How do leaders help their people adopt new behaviors? And how do we as individuals adopt new behavior?
Yeah, it all comes down to behaviors, actually. You know what? And behaviors are kind of what we do. That's how we express ourselves. Like that's how we get, we need to do whatever we need to do. When we think about behaviors that are needed to change short-term and long-term, the key is for what purpose? People need to know, we all need to know, when you think about ourselves too, is like, for what purpose? Like, what is the connection back to the broader, the broader good, the macro reason, the benefit, the rationale? So that is an absolute, I think, always imperative to be able to explain the why. Because otherwise, people are going to resist. The path of least resistance is the one that people are always going to take, and that is what they know. And that's why it's always imperative to be able to link it back to something that is absolutely paramount, that if you don't change, then nothing good's going to come of it. There needs to be the belief, and this is where trust comes into play too, that if you don't change, then these things are going to happen, which aren't necessarily the desirable outcomes. So it's being able to articulate the vision, as I was mentioning earlier, the vision of what the why, the new behaviors. So again, clearly with the pandemic and what our prime minister has done with his team, and just as a sideline too, like I think he's demonstrated a great thing in terms of how he has delegated to experts, delegated to his leadership team, shared the leadership, shared the authority. So, and they're all speaking generally from the same song sheet. And that is critical. And that is one of the things that is also critical for changing behaviors, because otherwise people are going to see that it's not necessarily, we don't necessarily have to change because not everyone believes it, or not everyone is on the same page.
Top parents,
Exactly. Because they learn how to play.
I can get away with this with mom, or that's I can get away with this with dad. But when they're both on the same page,
exactly. So that's really important, and about setting that clear, transparent, consistent messaging up front about the what and the why. So are we looking to increase, decrease, start or stop behaviors? Like what is it specifically and in particular that we're looking to do? And if in service of what? For what? Either a new strategy, vision. In this case, it's for our lives and for the safety of ourselves and our loved ones and for our health system. So it's the reason needs to be there.
Let me challenge you on that one a little bit, and representing somebody that might be thinking this. So let me play devil's advocate for a little bit. I felt that a lot of the leadership team, whether in Canada or around the world or even in Italy, you saw them saying lockdown, stay at home, don't go out, telling you the reason why it's spreading. We need to flatten the curve. They were very clear about the message. We even had the Premier of Ontario release the stats, the figures to show this is what we need to do to flatten the curve. So they did a lot of these things, but there's still some people that just refuse to stay home.
That's true.
In that situation, how do you manage that type of resistance where communication is not working as a tool?
That's a great question. And I think that in essence is something that every country is struggling with, whether it's in this pandemic or, an organization. There will always be that percentage of people, whether it's 10, 15%, 5%, there's always that percentage of folks that just do not get on board. And there's a number of techniques that I think that have been used and that are being used even now on the global scale. It ranges from more education, like really trying to understand from them, why is it that they're not listening, not aligning with the message. So understand maybe they've missed something. Maybe there's a stakeholder group that has different needs, different expectations, and in the haste to move forward, some things have been missed. So there's, I think there's still the onus on the leadership, on the organizational side of the change to learn a bit more. Then if there's still resistance, because sometimes resistance most of the time comes from fear of either not being able to move forward, not being able to do what's being asked, or it comes down to, in some smaller percentage, they just have an inherent distrust of everything and everyone, and there isn't an opportunity to be able to move that cohort along. As a first step, my experience has been try again in terms of an education, seek to understand, and seek to make some modifications if possible. Then if there isn't a change in their behavior, and it is absolutely critical to achieving the outcomes, and there's a bona fide connection to achieving the outcomes, we all know that that's required, then you take some more stricter measures, which I think is what's happening on the global scale, is that there's consequences. There's either, fines. Where will hit people at home, basically, in either the pocket, more freedoms, and restrictions that way. Because it becomes the few that can compromise for the many, and that is difficult to accept, right? When your responsibility is to the majority. So I think it goes down to from a voluntary, collaborative, engaging style to if people are still not going to change the behaviors, which have been demonstrated that are the ones that are required, then more stricter, forms take place. In an organizational setting, those end up being people actually, either moved to new roles, moved out of the organization, put together with people who actually have moved along to try and get someone else to influence, like opinion leaders and influencers, more informal influencers in the organization, to help people, those people who are still dissenting, understand why it's important to move forward. So there's tactics like that can be used. they clearly are not the desirable, because you want to be able to reach everybody and have everyone make a decision. The problem on the global scale too is that there are so many avenues of disinformation right now that are giving people alternative views of reality, alternative views of the facts. And when there's that in the ether, basically, and people don't know what to trust,
yes,
and they're going to do their thing, and they're going to dissent.
Trust is very important.
Right. And just like, with change management, we know that if you're going to change a process in an organizational context, if you're going to change a process, you need to take out those elements of the process that were in place before you're making the change. Otherwise, people are going to slip back into the same old way of doing things because those elements are still there. Mm-hmm. Same thing with kind of in this pandemic situation and the crisis management situation, is that there's avenues for people to slip back into what they were doing before because there's dissenters on a much broader scale.
Yeah.
So it becomes harder for people, and the challenge of our leaders, to continue to stick to the facts, be consistent in the messaging, clearly draw a line of sight from the behaviors that they're looking for to the vision, the rationale, and the expectations, and the why, and the what's in it for the WIFM, basically the what's in it for everybody. Like that still holds true on so many fronts.
Even dynamics.
Oh yeah, and providing supports to people. I think that's the key thing. Providing also supports, equipping people with the knowledge, the information, the tools to be able to move towards the behaviors that we're looking for. So whether it is about signs of, showing people how to wash their hands properly, or how to wear a face mask now properly, admitting also too that with new information comes new changes. I know that our government and others have gotten a bit of heat from changing the stance on the masks and on other things. And it could have been a mistake, or it could have been just with new information that new behaviors now are required. So I think we have to have, generally speaking, an open mind to what are the changing, the dynamics and a massive change initiative.
I like you say open-minded. And when I think of open-minded, I think about even leaders needing to be open-minded to the fact that everyone is different.
Right.
You're going to tell the first set of people this is what needs to happen, and there's not going to be any resistance to it. They're like, I need to do this. And there's some people that in the second messaging, third messaging, they're going to get it. In my experience in managing and leading change, I see where leaders feel, oh yeah, we're just going to send out this one message and everybody's going to get it.
Yeah,
oh no,
absolutely.
We don't need to start communicating right now. Let's wait till the end before we start communicating.
No.
And not realizing that you have to communicate and test different channels of communication.
Exactly.
And address people in different languages, realizing that the audience is diverse and people are diverse. You have to be open-minded to the fact that you're dealing with different types of stakeholders. And that's right. Stakeholder assessments or analysis or understanding your stakeholder groups becomes very important, because you need to understand that you're working with different types of people.
Absolutely. And that is a point that I definitely want to emphasize is this is, with either major transformational change or a crisis like this that we're working towards, having a true understanding, or truly a real understanding of the stakeholder groups and being in touch with their expectations is critical and paramount to success, and not over assuming or underestimating their reactions. With stakeholder analysis, it's important to even, obviously connect with the stakeholder, because it's easy to bring in bias and those assumptions that can help us make some decisions that are not necessarily in the best interest of these stakeholder groups. So we can introduce things that a particular group may not care as much about having to change their behaviors. Well, actually, we underestimated their reaction because they're in a financial situation that is affecting them, and they didn't take in the market factors or something. So it's absolutely critical. And to do that stakeholder analysis, absolutely. And you're talking about layering basically techniques and tactics for reaching people. Yeah, that old adage of
layering.
Right, yeah. Was it 7 to 22 times? You have to kind of reach people for people to get it.
Yeah, how many times did you say?
a 7 to 22 or something like that.
Oh,
That was like,
I have 7, but 22.
oh
Wow.
yeah, no, I heard that. Yeah,
I know. It's like you have to deliver a message 7 times.
at least 7 times, at least.
Yes, to get to them and get them to hear and understand. But talking about stakeholders, we've put some attention on stakeholders that the leaders serve. So when we talk about this crisis now, we talk about maybe the employees or the citizens. But what's also important that we alluded to at the beginning was understanding stakeholder groups that you can collaborate with as part of your team. Let's talk a little bit about partnering, because sometimes leaders can feel very alone, like I have to do this alone, or the change manager can feel very alone, or that change leader can feel very alone. But there's collaboration as well with other people.
Absolutely. And I think that's key, because whether it's like in this crisis situation or a major transformation, it is absolutely critical to have a team to work through whatever it is you're working through, the next steps, and to manage through and kind of basically see around the corner, see what's the next third, fourth, fifth obstacle or opportunity that's going to come our way. You can't do that on your own. As a leader, I know that the leaders at the top, but through these kinds of major shifts in where the ground is moving basically underneath everyone, it requires everybody with degrees of expertise in the different aspects of what's being managed to basically come forth, be trusted, and be part of the messaging. So the leader is critical and key in assembling a team that will look after and be on top of the elements that are required to move forward. They need to delegate to those individuals who have the expertise and the know-how, and also the characteristics of being able to work together as a team and move forward. Because putting together a united front is not a front. It's a united, cohesive team that the broader base of citizens in this case, but employees, can count on, so that they don't see that there's a weak link in that front. And that's absolutely important for the leader at the top to have that confidence and faith and trust in each of the individuals on that team, and eat for each other as well. And the leader needs to determine which decisions they must make on their own, and then delegate to the rest. And that is what I think we've seen with our prime minister, with other prime ministers who are setting a great example, and presidents across the world. They're not doing it on their own because they can't. They're not an expert in all the fronts of this massive change or this massive response that needs to be assembled. What also is important is being able to have people at the helm, basically here, steering the ship, who our citizens and our employees can actually relate to. So they need to be individuals who are empathetic, who are caring, who understand what's going on, because they're being impacted themselves as well, to offer basically a pillar of strength and some resilience that they can count on. And people who are part of the DNA basically of the organization and the culture and society in this case at large. So being able to align with the values, the beliefs, and the essence of the organization or the enterprise is critical, because then people can relate, people can align. They basically, because they start to modeling the behavior. So as leaders, right, they need to, it's one of the ways of behavior change we didn't talk about, but modeling the behavior.
For sure. Right? But talking about that, because I could go on and on and on, and I could go on and on when it comes to talking change management and change leadership. We've touched on the leader, and we've also spoken about individuals. When we talk about change leadership as a whole, we say change leadership is no longer for that leader at the top, that person who has position or title. Change leadership or leading change is something that we can do from the grassroots, from the middle, even from the top.
I agree.
So what's that final word or thoughts that you would leave with somebody saying, yes, you can do that. Yes, you can lead change, and you can make it happen regardless of title or position?
I absolutely believe that. You need all layers. You need the top, the middle, and the grassroots. You need the leaders to be able to look forward, set a path forward You need the grassroots and everyone down to the very introductory level of an organization or type of role in the enterprise and basically in our society, wherever. They need to feel like as if they're also empowered and have the ability to make some change. So it's the leader's responsibility to look forward, to be able to continue that faith and confidence that there is a path forward.
Mm-hmm.
And be able to communicate a sense of contribution, empowerment, and autonomy to people all the way down to, to introductory, like I said, layers, or across all different layers of the organization. And the middle is that linchpin, that element that holds it all together, that translates vision into behaviors, expectations, and reality to all the other layers of the organization. So it's an absolute imperative that all parts of the system work together in order to make change. There's no one better than another. There's no one more or less important. Everyone plays a role.
Yes.
And it's important for everyone to understand that, and that it really truly is a we situation right now. And we have leaders who are helping to set the path, but they are part of that system because they have to listen to what's coming from the grassroots and be able to respond and react and communicate to the others in the system, different roles and different contributions to be able to make things happen. So it's an absolutely imperative that it be a cohesive, and a belief that it's a cohesive system, and that the people who are charged with responsibility and accountability to move things forward believe that and model that behavior, because this pandemic has changed the entire world in terms of how we're going to behave going forward and how we're going to react and respond going forward to authority, to change, to resilience, to our own ability to react. And everyone is in it together. This is one of the most massive messages that's going around right now, is that we're alone, but we stand together. We're all in this together. That messaging cannot go away. That messaging, I think, is a new normal.
And you know what? That's a great note to end this on, because together we will make it happen. Together we will lead and drive change. Together we will make change a reality. Thank you so much, Soula, for joining me today. It's been a great conversation.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for involving me and including me in this wonderful series. Thank you so much.
That was great. And if anyone wants to connect with you, what's the best way? Twitter, LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, Twitter for sure.
So we're going to provide your Twitter details, and they will be able to see it at the bottom of the screen, and they will connect with you. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye for now. Stay safe.